international law case laws is because the diplomatic exchanges that I mentioned yesterday, those have a lot of relevance to play when the judgment is finally being delivered. That's why facts play a lot of role and hence a lot of emphasis on facts. So, brushing through the facts, which I'm sure all of you are already aware of, let me begin from where this entire incident began. So, well, the facts, and here it is important to make a difference between what we did yesterday and today. Unlike in yesterday's case, there were a lot of incongruities in the factual circumstances that India and Pakistan had here in this Kulbhushan Jadhav case. Both of them were not agreeing to most of the facts that were being laid by either of the parties. So when India says, or when India being the applicant here, it claimed that on 3rd of March 2016, Mr. Jadhav was kidnapped from Iran, where he was residing and carrying out business activities after his retirement from the Indian Navy. And subsequent to that, he was transferred to Pakistan. And that is exactly what we all are aware of. However, Pakistan said that while he was performing acts of espionage and terrorism on behalf of India in the area of Balochistan, and all of you, if you're aware of the political scenario in Balochistan, then you would realize the importance that this area plays to the diplomacy of both these countries, and I'm not delving into it at all in this talk. So, this
Mama,
Balochistan,
you're not audible. Please unmute yourself.
it's unmute. Am I audible now? Yes, right, right. Thank you, Ayan and Bikash. Thank you, Ruchi. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll continue. So in Pakistan, however, Pakistan said that they arrested Mr. Jadhav in near the border area, which of Iran and Balochistan, in that area, after supposedly having illegally entered the Pakistani territory. And Pakistan explains that at that very moment, when he was arrested, he was in possession of an Indian passport, and that passport bearing the name of Hussein Mubarak Patel. Of course, that was not his name as per the allegations of Pakistan. However, India has denied all these allegations. Now, remember that this incident took place on the 3rd of March 2016. And until the 25th of March, there was no official communication from the side of Pakistan with that of India. It was on the 25th of March that Pakistan raised this issue with the High Commissioner of India in Islamabad. And not only that, they released a video which I think all of us have had an opportunity to look at. And that video appears to be a confessional statement of his involvement in acts of espionage and terrorism in Pakistan at the behest of India's foreign intelligence services, as we all know, famously the RAW. So the circumstances, however, under which this video was created was disputed, and there is no data or there's no evidence on the reliability, on the circumstances on in which this video was recorded. And all of us, if we have had some kind of knowledge as to what happens in these cases, we know that there's a lot of coercion and pressure that is probably implemented while such videos are taken, and that is the reason the court too kind of frowned upon this particular video. However, as we shall see and as we shall move, we shall see the nitty-gritties that were involved here. So on that very same day, that means on the 25th of March, Pakistan not only called the High Commissioner and interacted with him and released this video, it took another major step, that of informing the permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. So you can realize the repercussions of such a move, because when you do this, that means you are accusing India, or for that matter, any country, of great allegations of terrorism. And you're not only informing the UN, but you're informing a body which is primarily responsible for protection of International Peace and Security, that is the UN Security Council. And on that same day, something more starking happened. That is, the High Commissioner of India in Islamabad had given it in writing to India that no, before that something else had also happened. The High Commissioner of India wrote to the High Commissioner of Pakistan saying that release information on this particular individual whom you have arrested. And they did, of course, India did not name the individual who was arrested. But to this particular letter, High Commissioner of Pakistan replies by saying that you will have to assist us in the uh, criminal investigation of Kulbhushan Jadhav. So, however, this happens much later because after this letter of 25th of March 2016, there were constantly lot of letters sent from the Indian side till October. So from March to October, you see there were around 10 or so letters that were exchanged. And not exchanged, but letters which were sent from the Indian side. And these letters are called as, note verbal, if you want to know the exact terminology. So those were sent from Indian side, and the Pakistani side, they do not at all answer to any of those. And this is exactly where things changed because there were no communications from the side of Pakistan. But Pakistan sent one letter replying to these letters a long time after these letters were sent by India, that we would like to investigate the Kulbhushan Jadhav case. So we require records and data from your side. So release the documents. So once so that letter was sent, India once again emphasized on the disclosure of information and consular access to Kulbhushan Jadhav. To which Pakistan replies by saying that, well, see, I have already told you that you have to give us information about Kulbhushan Jadhav. So if you do not give us information about Kulbhushan Jadhav, I'm sorry, we cannot help you get any access. So before I proceed further, I see Utkarsh Pandey asking. I'll just type it for Utkarsh. It is note verbally. That's how it's said. Yes. So the investigation that began, supposedly, as per whatever was there in the media at that point of time, the Pakistani media, goes something like this: that there was an FIR lodged against him, there was a supplementary FIR lodged also, and there was supposedly a confession before the magistrate as well. And this led to a supposedly trial of Mr. Jadhav on the 21st of September 2016. And according to Pakistan, this was conducted before the Field General Court Martial. And various details of the trial were made public. Now, this is also very important that none of these details were shared with India at all. Remember, when this is happening on the 21st of September 2016, before that, India had already asked for consular access and had asked for releasing of information on Kulbhushan Jadhav. But nothing had happened. And all these details were present in the public domain from the press releases. So as we shall see later that whatever case was framed or made out, or whatever application was made from India to the ICJ was only and only relying upon these press statements and the media coverages only. So you see, India had to make a case and write and submit before ICJ without having any kind of notification or details from Pakistan. So supposedly, again, there were witness examinations also that happened in front of Mr. Jadhav, who too supposedly put questions and could ask whatever queries that he had from these witnesses. But again, there is no information of these. Now, this completes the year 2016 and we enter 2017 when another such remarkable, in the negative sense, of course, happens from the side of Pakistan, when the Prime Minister, advisor to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, sends a letter to the Secretary General now of the United Nations, informing him about the involvement of Jadhav in destabilizing Pakistan. And I'm quoting exactly from the judgment and from the letters that were available. And it says that Jadhav, and so of course, which means India, wanted to destabilize Pakistan. So you realize that this is the second time that such an accusation is being made against India in the international forum. So earlier it was in the Security Council, next it was with the Secretary General. Now on the 27th, so during this time, a letter of assistance was also issued from Pakistan for the case. And as I've already told you, that India said that India rejected that, saying that we are not bound to reply to it just because of getting information about Kulbhushan Jadhav. And this, after this, what happens is that they, or rather, during this letter itself, Pakistan says that, well, you are supposed to abide by a particular UN Security Council resolution, which is Resolution 1373. If you want to note it down, it is UN Security Council Resolution 1373 of 2001, which deals with repression of criminal or terrorism matters, in which cooperation of nations is mandatory. So when this happens, the that's an accusation, of course, that India is trying to not suppress terrorist activities. However, this too was not at all replied in the manner that Pakistan wanted India to reply. Because I've already told you, and as we shall see, how this really had a lot of impact on the entire judgment. Now, finally, after all this, all the trials that have been taken place with following due process, of course, that's what Pakistan said. On 10th of April 2017, Pakistan announced that Mr. Jadhav had been sentenced to death. And this was also followed by a press statement of 14th April 2017 by the advisor of the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So you see that after having done everything, after sentencing uh, Jadhav, you give a statement and India is absolutely in the dark. And this, I'm constantly reiterating, that this changed everything in ICJ. And along with this statement of Pakistan of 2017, 10th April 2017, they also said that, well, Jadhav has the other remedies now. Jadhav can appeal before the military appellate court within 40 days. It can go for a mercy petition before the chief of army staff, and it can also go for a clemency petition before the president of Pakistan within 90 days. So in this press release also, these were mentioned. That is, even though he has been sentenced to death, these are the remedies that he has. And on 26th of April 2017, that is after all these have been done and after he has been sentenced to death, Jadhav's mother makes an appeal, which somehow is under consideration in Pakistan, which finally is granted much later in November 2017, wherein on humanitarian grounds, supposedly, his wife and his mother were allowed to visit. But this visit too was supposed to be quite safe and peaceful, and it should have been quite smooth. That is exactly what was promised by Pakistan to India. But that also, as per the visitors, that is the mother and the wife, they said that there was not much of cooperation. However, that is not under contention here, but for the facts of the matter. So after this, the Inter-Services Public Relations of Pakistan, if you want to note it down, the Inter-Services Public Relations of Pakistan, it issued a press release announcing that Mr. Jadhav had made a mercy petition to the Chief of Army Staff after the rejection of his appeal by the Military Appellate Court. So, supposedly, after the judgment, Jadhav had gone for appeal, that was rejected, and then the second alternative was also opted for. However, before the third one could go, Jadhav could go for the third one, that is before the president, we go, or rather India goes to the ICJ. Now, you see that the next point that we have to discuss here is with regard to the jurisdiction. So jurisdiction of ICJ comes from where? Of course, as we yesterday we dealt with it, that you have Pacific Settlement of Disputes, Chapter 6 of the UN Charter, wherein you have ICJ as one of the dispute resolution forums. Apart from that, what is the other forum which is the other document that also confirms ICJ to be the forum when a dispute of this kind comes up? And that is where you have the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, which is the VCCR. Now, this particular convention, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it, that Article 36 was under question. And it was the interpretation of Article 36, especially Article 36, Clause 1, which was the most important provision which had to be interpreted and reinterpreted in this judgment. So that means you're relying upon not just the UN Charter and the statute of the ICJ, but you're also relying upon this particular convention, which is the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, and the optional protocol. So just note down here that you have the optional protocol to this, and Article 1 of this optional protocol mentions that for any kind of interpretation issues or application of the convention, the compulsory jurisdiction of the ICJ has to be invoked. So, in case the question that you might have is with regard to the documents concerning jurisdiction, you have UN Charter, you have the Statute of ICJ, and you have the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations, especially the optional protocol and Article 1 of it. Now, this is important here that Pakistan has not at all contested that the dispute relates to the interpretation of this particular convention. So, which really sets the tone and makes the task easier all the more. But here, which I'm sure you have also probably had the opportunity to look at the mock tests, that a very interesting and important factor that was taken up not for the purposes of adjudication, but more on the verge of an opinion of the judges, and which actually had a lot of impact on the decision, or on this particular decision, and we could say that the jurisprudence in this regard has begun, is with regard to the fact that ICCPR, which is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights of 1966, was invoked by India. It was Article 14, which deals with free and fair trial and the various factors related to that. Those were also invoked by India, saying that giving consular access plus ICCPR being followed are the most important, or rather they are intrinsically linked with each other. The synergy that is being forged between these two documents is extremely important for the realization of elementary human rights. And this again is the exact phrase that was used in the judgment, when it said that the elementary human rights as emanating from Article 14 of ICCPR especially have to be given adherence to. So while this was more of an opinion, and they could not judge on this, as I said, did play a very, very important role. And the paragraphs, I will tell you the paragraph numbers. These are paragraph 36 and 37 where this was observed. So the court observed here that even though this particular provision is not an issue and this is not something that has to be dealt with, but this does not preclude the court from taking into account the other international law norms and obligations that a nation has in order to give effect to Article 36 of the Vienna Convention. Now, if we go to the timeline of what had happened and what finally, before going into the merits of it, So after the filing of this particular petition, on the 8th of May 2017, India requested for provisional measures, and these provisional measures were taken from, or rather, these, if you consider the legality of it, it's Article 14 or 41 of the Statute of ICJ, as well as Articles 73, 74, and 75 of the ICJ rules, the rules of court. And the provisional measures, you could say, were mostly two pronged. The first one was, and I quote, that it directed the Pakistani government to act in such a way as will enable any order of the court may make on this request to have its appropriate effects. That is provisional number one. That is, basically, in essence, it says that you just cannot execute him by speeding up your procedure, because that would make this entire application infructuous. And the second provisional measure was more explicitly, that is, not to execute Mr. Jadhav pending the final decision of the court, and shall inform the court of the measures taken with regard to the implementation of this order of provisional measures. Along with this, it also requested Pakistan, so you could say there are 3 points of the provisional measures. So the third one was to ask Pakistan to remain seized of the matter and not to move further or go ahead with this particular case. So this happens on the 18th of May, when the final, the order for provisional measures is made. So now on the 13th of June, the court
Mama, you're not audible.
Okay, it's okay. Not a problem. I'll repeat. Just tell me from where do you want me to repeat? Can anyone please just tell me from which one, or Rashmini maybe, do you want me to repeat the provisional measures?
You're
I
talking
think
about.
I'll tell about the provisional measures, I think. Right? Yes, so I think Bhumika had could note down 41, 73, 74, and 75, which means it's the provisional measures. Right. Right. So the provisional measures, so there were three provisional measures which were, brought about, or which were rather pronounced by the ICJ. There were three provisional measures. One was to ensure that not to do anything which would have no, or rather, which would make this entire case before the ICJ infructuous. So, if I quote, it said that to act in such a way as will enable any order of the court may make on this request to have its appropriate effects. And the second provisional measure was to stop executing Mr. Jadhav till the pending, or till the final decision of this particular case. And the third one was it requested Pakistan to remain seized of the matter and not to give any kind of direction or not to do anything with regard to that. Now, on 13th of June, so this happens in the month of May. On 13th of June, finally, the court says that, well, on such and such date, which is the 13th September 2017 and 13th December 2017, but within which India and Pakistan will file its memorial and counter memorial, respectively. And also, the ad hoc Pakistani judge, Mr. Jilani, was appointed to be the ad hoc judge, owing to Article 31 of ICJ statute, wherein, in case one of the parties wants to have one of their judges upon the panel because the other party's national is sitting as a judge, so in that case they can they can opt for an ad hoc judge. So Pakistan exercised that under Article 31, paragraph 2 of the ICJ statute, and it went ahead with appointing Mr. Gilani. It is Tasadduq Hussain Gilani. And finally, after all this and the memorials were filed, all this happened, at the fag end of the judgment, or rather the fag end of the trial, we could say, on 18th of February last year, that is 2019, Pakistan filed an application or a letter to the registry of ICJ asking for permission to call an expert in order to present some audiovisual material during the oral proceedings. But the registry simply denied it, saying that it would not be appropriate to grant Pakistan's request in this circumstance. So finally, this was not granted, and the oral hearings happened from 18th to 21st of February 2019. And that completes the jurisdiction, the factual background, jurisdiction, and of course the the issue with regard to the timeline and the provisional measures that were granted. So now, if we go to the claims that were made by India, we would see that the claims are around 4 to 5 of them, and I will deal with it at the end when we will talk about the remedies in detail. I will deal with it then, but just for the purposes of clarity and for the purposes of discussing what is it that we would be discussing in the merits, the first thing that India wanted was, of course, the immediate suspension of the death sentence. The second one was restitution in integrum, which means restitution, giving back to the status or restoring the status quo. And whilst this was argued for, and Article 36 was argued for, as I have already explained to you, the entire concept of ICCPR that was claimed by India here. The third one was to restrain Pakistan from giving effect to the sentence awarded by the military court. The fourth one was to annul the decision. If Pakistan is unable to do anything, it requested ICJ to annul the decision of the military court and declare that particular order as illegal. And the fifth one was to direct a trial under the ordinary law before civilian courts after excluding his confession that was recorded without affording Jadhav of any kind of consular access. And once again, ICCPR was invoked here. So you could broadly say that there were 5 kind of remedies and claims that were made by India. So, of course, Pakistan rejected all these, saying that none of them are admissible. So now that is when we have the admissibility of India's application, as you see on your screens. So you can see that there were primarily 3 objections that were raised by Pakistan with regard to the claims that were made. And these were categorized by the court as abuse of process, abuse of rights, and the fact that there was unlawful conduct by India and that it did not come to the court with clean hands. So we will go about I will go about explaining each one of them, and let us do it this way, like we did yesterday. After every such the issue of admissibility, I will stop for 30 seconds, even though they're very easy to understand. But yet, if you have any question, just ask me through the chat box like we did yesterday. So with regard to the abusive process, what was argued was that during the provisional measures, that is exactly what Pakistan said, that during the provisional measures, the hearing which was taking place, India failed to draw the court's attention to existence of something like which Pakistan called as highly material facts. So according to Pakistan, that meant that you have abused the process because you have not disclosed everything. Second, it said that you, as in India, had not lodged the clemency petition, so it doesn't have any jurisdiction here before the ICJ. Because if you remember, there were 3 modes which were available. The third one was the clemency petition before the president, which was not, even before Jadhav could go for it, ICJ's jurisdiction was invoked. So according to Pakistan, that meant it was abuse of process. And it also said that if you look at the optional protocol, the Vienna Convention optional protocol, even though we know that the Indian side invoked the jurisdiction of ICJ with Article 1 of the optional protocol, there were two other articles, Articles 2 and 3, which should have been given consideration to, which mentions about the other methods or modes of uh, settlement of disputes. So, according to Pakistan, that too was not given consideration, and directly going to ICJ makes no sense. However, ICJ said that there was, first of all, with regard to the fact of giving consideration to other dispute settlement mechanisms, there isn't any kind of rule that you have to give consideration to, say, arbitration or the conciliation proceedings before you approach the ICJ. That is not at all mandatory. Secondly, it said that there was considerable, and this is again I'm quoting from the judgment, it said that there was considerable uncertainty as to when a decision on any appeal or petition could be rendered if the sentence is maintained, as to when Mr. Jadhav could be executed. Which means that the court did understand the apprehension of the Indian side that Jadhav might just be executed and no one would even come to know. So, basing upon these, it said that it is absolutely fine that ICJ's jurisdiction has been invoked as a matter of emergency. The third one that it said was, there is no precondition, as I said, that there's no precondition to coming to ICJ. And for this, it had referred to the very famous US versus Iran case, the US hostages case, wherein exactly this interpretation of Articles 2 and 3 of Optional Protocol of Vienna Convention was taken. That is, Articles 2 and 3 act as substitute for the recourse to the court, and it is not that they have to first go for arbitration or conciliation or something like that. And that it is unreasonable thus to consider that there was abusive process. And also, it is very important here to note that the court quite sternly stated and observed that the threshold for abusive process is quite high. And unless and until you can prove that, you cannot reject a claim based on invalidity of the process. So, claim of alleged or rather abuse of process is a claim which has a very high threshold. So I'll stop at that. I don't think there should be any questions because this is just merely on the admissibility, but for the purpose of making it more easy for all of you to follow, if any question, in 30 seconds. The case was US versus Iran, which was also argued before the ICJ. So Aru says that just wondering there's more to the PPT. Yes, the reason I did the most important points are there in the PPT, and since it's a more of a revisional class, and I would be sharing this with the points that are most important. So I'm explaining each and every point, but the most important, you could say, keywords or whatever is mentioned over there. So you don't have to, you just said never mind, but it's for your ease, for all of you, that I chose to have the most important ones on the slides for all of you to revise quickly. Yes. Okay. So Articles 2 and 3 of the optional protocol contain the first one, that is Article 2, is with regards to arbitration proceedings, and 3 is with regard to conciliation proceedings, which are basically ADR mechanisms. So US versus Iran, the point which was referred here for this purpose of abusive process was with regard to the fact that Articles 2 and 3 of the optional protocol that you have, it does not mandate, or rather, it is a substitute to ICJ. So it does not mandate that you have to go for arbitration or conciliation. And if you fail there, you can only then approach the ICJ. The interpretation is not that. Right. So I think I have answered that. Okay. Next, moving on to the abuse of rights. Abuse of rights, what Pakistan says is that India refused to provide evidence of as I just told you, that it wanted to have the criminal proceedings, the criminal investigations. So for that, it wanted help from India. India refused. That is what Pakistan is saying, that is the abuse of rights of, of India. Secondly, it mentions that India failed to engage with its request for assistance in relation to the criminal investigation. And the third point that it raised was with regard to the fact that it is India who provoked, or rather who tutored, or you could say who was the mastermind behind Jadhav crossing the borders to enter Pakistan illegally, and that too with a false passport. So these are the reasons why it feels that India has abused rights. Now India says that, well, you cannot have a precondition to giving consular access under Article 36, which means that you cannot say that you give us information or you give us documents and all the evidences that we seek from you, and only then we will give you details about the charges of uh, Jadhav, and that we will give you consular access. So that is exactly what India said. And there is one more important point here, which relates to something that we discussed yesterday. We discussed about sections 166A and 166B of CRPC, which is on letters rogatory, as I mentioned, and I've given you the concept of it. There is a sister concept, which is mutual legal assisted treaty, which is, in short, it is called MLAT. MLAT, Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty. So when you have this kind of a treaty with any nation, it means that you agree for legal assistance, and that could be in various forms, in the form of giving evidences, in the form of getting members from, or citizens from your country to the other country for the purposes of examination or witness examination or confessional statements, whatever may that be, as per the treaty. So India said that since there is no MLAT treaty between India and Pakistan, there is no obligation whatsoever with regards to disclosing or kind of giving any information or details to Pakistan. So that too was something that was argued by by India, and it, of course, as you can understand, that this was quite reasonable and justified. And finally, it went in favor of India when the court held that abuse of rights cannot be invoked as a ground of inadmissibility, and that it has to be, if at all, has to be argued in the merits. So, for the purposes of admissibility, this was rejected. And also that Pakistan had itself claimed Jadhav to be an Indian. So when it says, so as I was giving you the facts, that Pakistan had said that, well, India had never said in its first note verbal that it did not disclose the name of Jadhav, so we do not know about whom this India was seeking information for. So with regard to that, also court observed that Pakistan itself was contradicting their statements because they had already acknowledged him as an Indian owing to the passport that that Jadhav had. Now Pakistan, according to the court, and if I kind of quote from what the court observed, it said that Pakistan seems to argue that India cannot request consular assistance with respect to Jadhav. So the fact here in being, again, and this was the only major point here, and as you will see in the entire merits also, this was argued, and this is how the case was decided, that Article 36 will not at all have any kind of exception or precondition to it being invoked. So Article 36 stands as it is. And you cannot say, or you cannot argue that since India did not do this, did not give us information, we won't give consular access. So now going to the next one, and I think I will complete the third objection, and then I will take questions if at all, because it's a very short one. So it said that this one was with regard to the fact that India did not come to the court with clean hands, the clean hands doctrine that we all are aware of. That was what Pakistan said, since it had false passport. Now, India said that, well, and it again kept reiterating just one point that whatever may that be, you cannot stop us from having access to Jadhav. And the court also relied upon this argument, and it did say that whether India came to the court with clean hands or not, that is not at all sufficient for the purposes of denying Article 36 and denying consular access. So whatever may that be, wrongful acts committed by India or whatever may that be, you cannot, as a matter of fact, as a matter of international law and diplomacy, you cannot stop consular access. So before we move on to, so hence you can understand that, as I've already mentioned on the slide, that India's application was made admissible. So if there are any questions with regards to the admissibility, please shoot. So I see there are no questions, so I will quickly move on to the next part, which is where we will be entering into the merits, and you would see that most of it relates to that one particular article, which is Article 36 of the convention. So the first question that had to be understood here is whether at all Article 36 is applicable or not. And for that purpose, it was of course argued, and Pakistan and India had their versions to say. But the court has again understood the applicability of Article 36 on three grounds. That is, whether it is applicable, Article 36 is applicable even for the cases of espionage or not, whether Article 36 should be governed by customary international law, and there was an agreement between India and Pakistan in 2008 for exactly regulating such incidents of detention or arrest of any individual, either India or Pakistan, in either of their territories, and what would happen. So, on these three grounds, this was tested. So, with regard to espionage and whether Article 36 is applicable for espionage or not, of course, you can realize that Pakistan said that, well, there is nothing mentioned in Article 36 that you have to extend this particular provision, that is, you have to give consular access to people who are, or the two nationals who are detained or arrested for the charges of espionage. That means it is a justifiable limitation to not granting consular access. For this, it also referred to the Travox, and in the Travox, which was also referred to by India, it shows that, well, there was a kind of discussion on whether to have it or not to have it, but it was chosen not to have it because Article 36 was left quite broad in order to ensure that cases which are, there could be various kinds of such detentions that might ensue. So the drafters left it quite broad. And because the drafters left it quite broad, it was for the courts to determine whether Article 36 would be applicable or would not be applicable. And India said that since there is nothing mentioned over there, which means that it will going to be equally applicable for anyone who is arrested, even for charges of espionage. Because had there been an exception which was conceived and would have been the intention of the drafters, it must have been mentioned. So this point was taken up by the court, which said that, well, of course, that the object of the convention, the VCCR, has to be looked into here. Because VCCR mentions in its preamble that this is being forged to contribute to the development of friendly relations among nations. And Article 36, paragraph 1 happens to facilitate exactly this by facilitating the exercise of consular functions relating to nationals of the sending state. Thus, these two, if you see and if you try to understand the argument raised by Pakistan and that of the exception of espionage, according to the court, it would run counter to the purpose. of this particular provision if the rights provided under Article 36 could be disregarded when the receiving state alleges that a foreign national in its custody was involved in espionage. The apprehension of the court here was that if you go with such a kind of definition or rather interpretation, it will make it very very rigid, and it can mean that at any point of time whether Pakistan or any other nation can merely exercise espionage as an exception and can detain someone, making him absolutely incommunicado. Incommunicado means that a person is left with no communicational facilities and the whereabouts of the person is not known, and that cannot happen. So, Article 36 of the Convention does not exclude from its scope certain categories of persons, such as those like suspected of espionage. And this is where this judgment comes up very, very prominently, because it says that, well, even though there are no such, explicit mention of espionage in the entire convention and Article 36, customary international law must be looked here, because India and Pakistan, both of them did refer to customary international law, with Pakistan arguing that, well, at the time of the convention being forged, customary international law showed that uh, you can, if you want, exclude persons suspected of espionage from being given consular access. So, for that purpose, the court had to go back to the beginning of Article 36 to understand whether at all for espionage there are categories, a separate category has to be made. For this, it refers to two documents, you could say. One was the ILC, that is International Law Commission of 1960, and the Travox and the reports of the Vienna Conference of 1963. Whilst going through it, what it came out quite intriguingly is that the words, if you look at Article 36, it says that the local authorities shall inform the consul of the sending state without delay. And the so who is it? It is Aru asking which report. So the report of ILC of 1960 and the Vienna Conference of 1963, which led to the codification of this particular convention that we are dealing with. These two were referred to. So it said that initially the phrase that was used was without delay, which was later amended to without undue delay as it exists now, with the same repercussions, including even if also the system of incommunicado is taken up, which means that even if you consider a person to be suspected of espionage or terrorism or whatever may that be, you will have to inform the sending state without undue delay, which means that, well, it is not that you have to immediately inform, but you have to inform subsequently in some point of time. Now, whether what would be that threshold period is something we will discuss later. So, for this purpose, the court also referred to the remarks which were made by the chairman of ILC of 1960, that if exceptions are included, then the purpose would fall flat, and hence exception of espionage was not given. But when reference was made to the Vienna Conference of 1963, this undue aspect was deliberated quite a lot. And what the court found important here was the the understanding and interpretation of an expert called Mr. Zorek, who was asked by the chairman to clarify as to what is the situation and what would and how should we understand this provision. To which he said that they were intended to allow for cases in which the receiving state's police might wish to withhold a criminal in custody for a time. That means the reason undue is given is to facilitate the receiving state to also conduct its investigations for some time, but at the same time inform the sending state. So at no cost would that, or you cannot let go of your responsibilities of informing the sending state. So thus, while espionage could be understood as an exception, it is still not wholly restricted or prohibited. You will eventually have to give access. And thus, the Travox very clearly showed that cases of espionage would still be incorporated. This was the first one. The second one, if you remember, I said whether the customary international law would govern Article 36. And as I've already told you, and I've already given you how this transpired in through the reference to the Vienna Conference of 1963 and the report of ILC of 1960, it said that even if you rely upon the customary rules of international law, which is there mentioned in the preamble of the Vienna Convention, there too you can see that no exception would be made. So while there is on one hand customary international law asking for you to give access, even if you can recognize some kind of customary international law, which too was debated, as I will come later, that espionage cases should be an exception, there too you cannot say that you will not give access. So coming to the third one, which is on the 2008 agreement. So the 2008 agreement mentioned that, and this to the 2008 agreement was brought in effect with Article 73 of the convention, because Article 73 says that, okay, the PPT is invisible, is it? I will try and get back. So this particular, but I'll still continue. The convention, Article 73 of the convention says that you can, in furtherance to this particular convention, you can go in for an agreement or a treaty subsequent to this. That means, however, that treaty will not at all be contrary to the to the Vienna Convention. So, and this is something which is there for most of the treaties that you have in place, wherein you are allowed to, of course, go beyond the mother convention. So it was from that virtue of that Article 73 that the 2008 agreement was forged. And this agreement, if you look at it and if you go through it, you would see that it includes all the instances of detention and what would happen in case someone is detained and how would you treat if someone is detained. Excuse me. For that, it mentions that you will have to give the same kind of consular access which have been understood in the convention, the Vienna Convention. And there was just one exception, or rather, you could say it was interpreted as an exception, was with regard to political or security grounds, in which it said that you will have to examine the case on merits. And whilst you are mentioning it on merits, you will still have to give access, and there can be no exception to it. So, as you can realize, that we have already understood that the convention, no matter what, has to be given effect. And the purpose of the convention is to grant consular access, and that is how the consular relations have been forged. So, if you consider, if you give reference to a treaty wherein all these objectives are not fulfilled, then there is no point in having such a treaty. Thus, it said that even if you go by the treaty, the 2008 agreement, that is absolutely tandem with the treaty, and the preamble of the agreement says that it is desirous of furthering the objective of humane treatment of nationals of either of the countries. So, if that be the case, then you will have to ensure that Article 36 rights are agreed to and they are given, because humane treatment has a lot of relation to do with that of Article 36 rights. Now, I will move on to the next one, wherein it said that there was violation of Article 36. So you can understand that article. So from here you understand that Article 36 is applicable to the instance that we are discussing. But whether it was violated or not would be discussed now. But before that, if there are any questions, please go ahead. 30 seconds. Okay, so Sheetal says, Ma'am, I couldn't understand this point on sending state and receiving state. Please, can you explain this point with regard to this case by subject to Pakistan and India? Right. So, Sheetal, and for everyone, sending state is where the individual belongs. So, Jadhav is an Indian and he belongs to India. So, the sending state here is India, and the receiving state here would be Pakistan. So you could, for the purposes of understanding it, you understand it in this manner that as if India is sending Jadhav to Pakistan and, and Pakistan is receiving Jadhav. So accordingly, I think you can understand which is the sending state and the receiving state. So I don't think there are other questions to it. I don't know why you can't see the entire presentation, but I think you will get the essence of it. And anyway, I will be discussing it. So going to the second one, which is the alleged violations of Article 36 of the Vienna Convention that was argued by India. This again was understood on a three-pronged basis by the court. First, this Article 36 was violated firstly when Jadhav was not informed of his rights. Secondly, Article 36 was violated when India was not informed of Jadhav. And thirdly, Article 36 was violated when the access was denied. So if you go with all these three, you would realize that the first one, which is failure of Pakistan to inform Jadhav of his rights, is understood from the public statements itself that were made by Pakistan. So the public statements that Pakistan made was with regard to the fact that detainee was not entitled to consular access. So what Pakistan kept on saying is that, well, it is a case of espionage. For espionage, there would be no such incident, or rather, there is no obligation in order to make any kind of, or rather, give consular access. So he is not liable to get any kind of benefit under Article 36. Now, whether he was informed of his rights or not primarily comes from Article 36, paragraph 1b of the convention as well. And Pakistan has not contested India's contention that Mr. Jadhav was not informed of his rights. And in fact, as I said, that in its oral pleadings and written pleadings, it only was concerned with espionage, and it tried to avert its responsibilities by quoting the exception of espionage. So these statements, which were made public along with the actions of Pakistan, ensured, or rather, it led the court to conclude that there has been breach of Article 36 1b of the convention, where Jadhav was not informed of his rights. The second one is that Pakistan failed to inform India about the fact that Jadhav has been captured. So for that, of course, you can realize that I've already given you the factual background, facts and circumstances, that he was arrested on the 3rd of March, and the first time there was any kind of interaction with regard to Jadhav was on the 25th of March. So India said that there was no explanation as to why it took so many days, that is almost 2 to 3 weeks, for not informing India about about the fact that the Jadhav was in their custody. Now, Pakistan said that, well, and now this is where comes into the picture of the interpretation that we have just understood with regard to the phrase without undue delay. It said that the phrase means that you do not have to immediately inform. So we did not immediately inform. There is no problem with it. And for this, it tried to quote another case, which is the other case that you have with regard to this jurisprudence, that is the Mexico versus United States of America. So Pakistan contended that immediate consular access is not at all required, and that Article 36 Clause 2 must be exercised in a manner that is in accordance with the domestic law of the receiving state. And there is, of course, the sovereignty principle that applies. So we are not bound to give any kind of access because it is an act of espionage and the laws of the country do not support, or if you have to go in tandem with the laws of the country, that does not allow us to give any kind of access. Here, whilst judging this particular point, there were three issues that were understood by the court. It said whether Jadhav made a request or not. Because if you see Article 36 1b says that if the arrested or the detained individual seeks or requests uh, for any kind of consular access, that is when the receiving state has to give the consular access as sought by the individual. So whether Jadhav at all made this request or not has to be seen when we are arguing whether Pakistan failed to inform India as well as whether Pakistan failed to inform Jadhav of his rights. To which a very interesting point was mentioned and was understood by the court, wherein it said that well, both these are intrinsically involved. So the unless and until Pakistan informs Jadhav that well, you have the right to, or rather, he is informed of the rights that he has under Article 36, he will not be able to exercise his right to seek consular access. And it is exactly based on that the court said that well, you do not have you did not at all give Pakistan this, rather you did not give Jadhav this particular right to know of his rights under Article 36, because the last line of Article 36 1b says that the said authorities shall inform the person concerned without delay of his rights under this subparagraph. And while interpreting this last line, the court went back to the Trevaux again, wherein UK had expressed some concerns about this delay, with delay or without delay, and all these terminologies, and that's when UK pressed for having this last statement, wherein it said that well, the authorities have an obligation to inform the concerned individual of the right that he has. Something which you can understand is there even in our legal system, that you have to inform the accused of the right that he has. So according to the court, that was not done by Pakistan, and hence he could not request. So the fact which was being argued by Pakistan, that well, Jadhav did not ask us, so we did not give, falls flat. Now, this was, of course, you can understand that court had very clearly adjudged that there was no access given. So similarly, that second issue, which was identified under whether Pakistan had failed to inform or not, was whether India was given access or not. So the court said that well, we all know and we have already established that there was no access given. So it did not go in much in depth of it. And secondly, and the third point within this was there was late, whether there was any kind of delay or not. To which again, as we have discussed, Pakistan started saying that you do not have any liability. We do not have a liability to inform immediately, so we do not have to inform immediately. So it is fine even if we did not inform for 3 weeks. To which the court quoted two judgments. One was La Grande, and which was the US case, and the other one was with regard to the Mexico case. In one, it said that a delay of just 40 hours was considered to be a violation. But on the other, it said that the delay of 5 days was considered to be not a violation. So it is obvious that it is very contextual. But if you understand the repercussions as per this particular facts and circumstances, you would see that yes, there has been delay, and that means Pakistan had breached the obligation to inform without delay. So moving to the third and the final one with regard to denying any kind of access to Mr. Jadhav, it is you would now by now realize that it is mostly the Article 36 which is being reiterated and reiterated, because everything boils down to Article 36. No matter what whatever may that be, it is Article 36 which is, you could say, it's a shall clause. If you read Article 36, you would realize it is a shall clause, and that it is an obligation on the concerned receiving state to inform firstly of the fact that Article 36 exists, of the fact that Article 36 rights have to be invoked, and of the fact that if at all the rights, whatever rights are there, the individual has to be informed of the rights. Not only that, it is an obligation to undertake and to ensure that Article 36 is adhered to. So, while understanding and trying to, appreciate the fact whether consular access was at all given or not, paragraph 1C, 36 1C was referred to by the court, wherein it said that the officers have a right to visit him, and that was denied, which means Article 36 1C was also denied to Pakistan. And as a result of this, the entire case falls flat and it against Pakistan, and it goes in favor of India. And it said that again, it reiterated when it said that the fact that you, Pakistan, you did not give access was because India did not fulfill that condition of giving you all those documents. That cannot at all be an exception. And I think I have been repeating this, but this is exactly what has been repeated in the order. And I will, end this portion, this particular alleged violations of Article 36, by mentioning just one last thing that Pakistan had argued that supposedly again that Kulbhushan Jadhav had sought for legal help and legal representation, which was granted by Pakistan. So, as per Article 36, that he should have legal representation was adhered to. But what India argued, and which was accepted by the court, was irrespective of the fact that a qualified legal representation was given, there was no consular access. And unless and until you have a consular access, the other rights which follow, including the right of the consular post to have interactions with the person detained, trying to understand what kind of legal help he requires, and all those nuances of it, you cannot go for a legal representation. So, what even if you have given access or legal representation, that does not take away the fact that you cannot, or you would say that you would not give access. So that almost ends our case, and just one more portion, or rather, two more portions are left, which are very short. But of course, the remedies are left. So before that, if there are any questions owing to the violations of Article 36, which is the only thing under contention here, please ask me in 30 seconds. Okay, I see some sort of things here. Okay. Okay. So Utkarsh, the case. So the Trevox preparatories is the preparatory documents for any kind of treaty. Those are Trevox preparatories. So that was referred to while trying to understand the interpretation of the various terminologies, like without delay or without undue delay. All those terminologies were understood from the Trevox. That is the preparatory discussions. Something, you can say, you could akin this concept to that of the Constitutional Assembly debates that we have. It is exactly like that, but that is there for every treaty that is forged, that is made. So Anjali said the cases. So one is the Mexico case, which is the Avena case. It is popularly known as Avena. And the other one is the La Grande case, which concerns USA. Sheetal also asked the same question. So I'll just type it for all of you. One is La Grande and the other one is Avena. So this concerns Mexico, and La Grande is US. There you go. Utkarsh, I think you could understand the difference between Lagrange and Travox and all that. Just confirm me. Oh yes, you've already said. Right. Yes, right. Okay. So moving forward with the second last portion of it, which is what Pakistan tried to say that, well, there was, abusive rights, and we have already dealt with it, so I won't take much time here, wherein uh, so it is Avera case. It is Mexico versus USA. Yes, it is. There are two different cases. One is with regard to La Grande, which is the other case, and the other one is, I think it is US versus Germany. Yes, La Grande is US versus Germany, and Mexico versus USA is the Avena case, which I've just quoted. There are two cases, and in fact, this also brings me to one more important point here, which I missed. That is, these are the only two cases that were, you could consider as precedents, even though precedents are not what is followed in ICJ, as I'm sure all of you know, but for the purposes of reference to same factual circumstances before India and Pakistan, these were the only two cases. And I think in your mock test also you had questions owing to this. So you have Lagrad and you have Avena. Yes. Now, so as I've already mentioned to all of you that Pakistan tried to say that India did not come to the court with clean hands. So as a result of which, it tried to say that we do not have to follow Article 36, but that was not adhered to by the court, and Pakistan's arguments were rejected because it said that there can be nothing which can justify India not giving consular access. Now, moving to the last slide and moving to the last part of it, which is the remedies, as you can see, and as I've already said, with regard to the claims that India made. So, I will just quickly go through the remedies here, and there were a few observations which were made. So, firstly, that we have already realized that the internationally wrongful acts were committed by Pakistan because Article 36 was breached. And Article 36, as I've already told you, was understood with Article 14 of ICCPR. So that was, in fact, that came up, in this particular opinion here in the whilst trying to understand the remedies. Secondly, was the Kushagra. I think you've sent something. I will just go through it. Let me complete this portion. I'll go through it. Second is something very important, since we just discussed about Lagran and Avena case. India tried to distinguish, and there was a reason why it tried to distinguish it. It said that in Lagran and Avena, if you see in both these cases, the order of the court was that review and reconsideration of the judgment which were pronounced, which means that in our case for India, the judgment which was given by the military court was with regards to execution of Jadhav. So review and reconsideration was ordered in Lagran and Avena. So India tried to show that, well, our case is not as per the situation in, say, these two cases uh, in USA. Because, for example, in USA, you have a very robust judicial system. And this judicial system will definitely be following, or would be, taking account of the due process. And the fair trial would be ensured. But for Pakistan, that is what India said, that, but for Pakistan, we cannot be sure of the kind of adjudicatory mechanism that would be in place. And while trying to argue this, India very intelligently referred to a judgment of the Pakistan Supreme Court of 2016, and which was on it was Zaman Khan versus Federation of Pakistan, wherein it said that the judicial review in Pakistan is very narrow, And judicial review for any kind of case is based on only three grounds. That is, on the ground of having no quorum or quorum non judice, or absence of jurisdiction, or malified or any kind of malice or malified intention in the judgment that has been pronounced. So a review can happen only in these cases. And whether at all the judgment of the military court in case of Jadhav would at all fall into this narrow definition or not was a great matter of concern for India. Now, while acknowledging another judgment rendered by the Peshawar High Court in 2018, it appears to have taken a very broader view, and India did refer to that as well. But that, after having gone to the Supreme Court of Pakistan, has been suspended. That again kind of reiterate or kind of re-emphasized on the concerns of India and on the fairness of the trial. And thus, India tried to show how it is different from Lagran and the Aveda case. Now, Pakistan said, with regard to the remedy of annulment, if you all remember, the last one, which was the fifth point that I mentioned of India, was that the claim of annulling the decision of Pakistan military court. It said that Pakistan said that, well, it is absolutely a matter of domestic concern, firstly. Secondly, whether to annul or not is a matter of criminal appeal. And ICJ cannot act as a court for criminal appeal. Thus, if at all, and this is where it is very, very interesting, if at all you want any kind of remedy to be given, nothing more than review and reconsideration, like in Lagran and Avena, can be given to India. So this is where the court kind of gave a stop to the arguments being raised by India, and as we will now see, finally what was held. But before that, you would of course, it's a kind of recalling whatever I've already said, that Pakistan, while trying to argue for review and reconsideration, did say that, well, clemency is also left, and that was also not exercised by India. So that too means that we do have a very fair procedure, and we have a graded procedure of criminal adjudication, and that has to be taken into account. Having said all these and having arguing on all this, as you can see on your screens, these were the remedies that were given. That is, there is no doubt that Article 36 was violated. No doubt that Article 36 has relevance with ICCPR. But the court cannot go into the correctness of the judgment or the sentencing or whatsoever. It can only be done through a kind of review and reconsideration. That is why it said that you will have to give an effective review and reconsideration of the conviction and sentence of Mr. Jadhav. And that it also said, the court said that the partial or total annulment of the decision of the military court cannot be considered as the sole remedy under Article 36. Because Article 36, which is what the court is concerned with, is only to do with giving consular access and nothing more than that, which it has understood, and it has very categorically stated that it has violated, as in Pakistan has violated. So of course Pakistan will have to give consular access, and it has to ensure effective and proper review of the judgment. So the choice was now left to Pakistan as to how to do and what to do. But very importantly, a continued stay has been given to the execution of Jadhav, which was, as we all know, a matter of provisional measure. So that has been, you could say, extended to Jadhav for indefinite period of time. That completes the Kulbhushan Jadhav case, and I will go through the questions that have come up. So the Pakistani case, Adu, was Zaman versus. I will just, if you want, I will just type out the case for you. It is Syed Zaman versus I forgot the respondents here, but I will give it to you. But it is this Zaman case, and it was before the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Let me go to the next one. What is that? Yes, Zaman Khan was a Federation of Pakistan. Thank you, Utkarsh. Okay, I did not see it's already mentioned. Okay. So Shomashri says that so both Lagran and Avena were cited only for. Yes, right. It was only for the purposes of for the purpose of review and reconsideration. And of course, the other points that I mentioned, there were other cases, with regard to admissibility, as I said, the whether you have to immediately inform or not. For those also, the Lagran and Havana cases uh, were referred to, but the groundbreaking, you could say the groundbreaking aspect of Lagrange and Avena were taken up here. So, no, Sheetal, for 36, it was only Article 36 that was referred to, and Lagrange and Avena were primarily referred to because of the review and reconsideration. Okay, so I hope that clarifies the doubt. So, here consular access was not given for Jadhav. So, Pakistan was in violation of Article 36, and thus it was taken up. But Lagran and Avena had to be referred because the finally, if you look at what had finally happened, that was only the, that was only effective review and reconsideration and nothing beyond that. So, that is the reason Avena and Lagran were used. Doctrine of clean hands was evolved in which case? Well, doctrine of clean hands is a principle that we all understand. It is there in common law jurisdictions, and this is a principle of law. It was not specifically, we cannot say that in so and so case, in other international law or in ICJ, this particular doctrine was being evolved, but it is something that we all know, even in our jurisdiction too. When we're talking about it, you know that coming to the court with clean hands is a very important factor here. So it was from that, that same principle was supplanted here. Aru says, ma'am, the verdict was 15 to 1. Yes. Right. Okay. Thank you, Aru, for bringing that up. 15 is to 1. Right. That is right. That's because the only judge that was who, this gave the dissenting opinion was Judge Jilani, who was the ad hoc judge of Pakistan, and it was primarily grounding on the most of the arguments of Pakistan, especially that espionage is the charge that is against Jadhav, and since it is espionage, there is no reason why access has to be given, and that it is the domestic affair of Pakistan, so it can not at all be interfered by any other country. That was also argued, or rather that was what he felt should be how this case should have been judged. So and so that those were the only the only things that the dissenting opinion came up with. It was mainly, and as you can see, since it is 15 is to 1, it is quite obvious. Well, it is not, we shouldn't be saying that maybe so explicitly, but you can all understand why and how, and that's quite justified also. Right. So Sheetal said, ma'am, it's Islamic Republic of Iran versus clean hands. Well, yes, that's true. Yes, you're correct. It actually now reminds me that that particular case, in that also this doctrine was used. You're very correct. Absolutely. In that, it was definitely used. However, the doctrine as such, it was not really evolved in that particular case. It was referred to in the Tehran as a US versus the US hostages case. It was referred there. You're correct. But it was not that the doctrine was evolved in that. The doctrine is a very much a common law doctrine, which is a very much a principle of law that is referred to. So I hope with that we have no other questions, or do we? Thank you, Utkarsh. You have been really interactive. Thank you. Sheetal too. So much, Aru, you have all been quite interactive. It was amazing to. Okay, sorry, Kushagra had a question. Ma'am, was there any issue regarding why the case was tried in military court and not in district court? Well, see, this was exactly what was claimed by India, that he should be tried in the civilian court and not in the military court. But Pakistan said that, well, it's a domestic affair. And finally, the court said that, this is the choice is left to Pakistan to identify and to understand where there would be effective reconsideration, review and reconsideration, where the trial would happen all over again. What would that mechanism be? It is entirely on Pakistan. But this issue was definitely raised by India. It was, of course, opinions were given by the court too. But finally, at the end, when you look at the remedies and what was passed, this was nowhere, because, as I've already told you, that it is only effective review and reconsideration that is within the power and jurisdiction of ICJ. Yes, so I think with that we end this discussion. Thank you, because it was also quite interactive yesterday. So over to you, Ashwini. All the best to all of you. I really hope that you do very, very, very well, as I told you all yesterday. So have a wonderful time appearing for CLAT. That is also an experience you would be having for a lifetime. Trust me. So be positive, as I always say, and just go ahead, give it. And yes, all the very best. Hope to meet all of you in person someday, somewhere in this world. Hopefully after the pandemic. So Ashwini, are you taking it over? Yes. Thank
Okay.
you, Karsh.
Thank you so much, Sohava. Thank you so much.
Yes.
And everyone must have enjoyed that. So, okay, by this note, we will end this class.
All right. So just one thing, in case something that I generally do when I end my classes is if all of you are in okay position, if we could all switch on your videos and we could just wave our hands, it would be really sweet. There's no compulsion here at all, but if you all want, I mean I like that a lot. Just wave and see, look at each other. So 30 seconds to do that, and then we leave. Ashwini, you can do it, of course. Why don't you switch on yours? At least we can meet. Yes, Himani. Hi. Ashwini, switch on yours. I can meet you at least. Utkarsha, it's so sweet.
Hi.
Okay. So, okay, I have not met
Yeah,
you.
Akhilesh. Okay.
Oh, right, I have not met you. So, this is the virtual meet, even though I went there quite a lot of times. I mean, were you speaking throughout? I thought it was Ashwini. Oh my God.
No. So, hi guys. Finally, we met.
Yes, we met. Virtual meet. Not bad. All the very best to all of you. So we'll call it a day. Okay. Akhilesh,
Okay.
bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.